I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster. And I don't have to do it for the election. I've already done a lot of wall for the election, 2020. And the only reason we're up here talking about this is because of the election.
President Trump making his emergency declaration to build a border wall earlier this morning. Let's bring in White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Great to have you on the Daily Briefing on this great day, on a Friday, where it's nice there in Washington, D.C., and the president was able to be in the Rose Garden today, took a lot of questions from the press. Critics of his seizing on this line that I didn't need to do this in regards to the national emergency, and some saying that that will be the opening line of every legal complaint that goes forward. How will you deal with that as press secretary?
Look, I think the biggest thing is that he shouldn't have to do this. Congress should have stepped up and done their jobs and done everything necessary to fully and safely secure the border. The president could have waited and he could have drugged this out. The bill allows for 55 new miles of wall, which is a great step forward, and it is certainly a down payment on the wall, but it doesn't finish the job. And the president is somebody who wants to complete the job, he wants to finish the job, and he wants to stop illegal immigrants and drugs and trafficking from coming across the border, and he knows that you have to have a wall in order to do that. He doesn't want to drag this out over the course of the next several years. He wants to get the funding now so we can stop this national security and humanitarian crisis at the border and take care of it.
I was remembering, of course, people have played the clip that President Trump was quite critical of President Obama years ago, but I wondered if he's found, now that he's in the Oval Office, he's realized that working with Congress is kind of a pain in the rear, and they might have something in common now.
I'm sure that they can probably find a little bit of common ground in the fact that Congress can certainly be difficult to work with. But the difference between President Trump and President Obama is apples and oranges. What President Obama did in 2014 was he completely ignored the Constitution. He violated federal law by opening up the borders, by having mass amnesty, and even providing benefits to illegal immigrants. What the president is doing is actually fulfilling his constitutional duty, fulfilling the oath that he took as president of the United States to protect the people of this country, to secure our country. And there's a very big difference between what the two actions these individuals have done. They're actually opposite when you compare them, and so it's just totally different circumstances.
What about the concern from some that say that this could set a terrible precedent in the future? And I thought of former Senator Harry Reid, who basically used the nuclear option on confirmations, and that has led to President Trump being able to confirm two very conservative Supreme Court nominees, and there's a legacy issue there. Any concern on that point?
I think the president is going to have an incredible legacy. He's had an amazing 2 years already, historic first 2 years in office, and I think his next 6 years are going to be equally impactful. And I think that the two Supreme Court justices are something that are going to be one of the biggest and best parts of the president's legacy, and certainly one of the most lasting, and something he should never apologize for is pushing forward. The sad part is that he had to do that. He shouldn't have to do that in order to put people. He is the duly elected president of the United States. 63 million Americans came out and supported him and said, I want this person, this man, to choose who the next Supreme Court justice is, who the federal judges are. I want this person to be able to make decisions and impact the day-to-day life of these people.
I totally get it. My point only was that Harry Reid had made a decision that now has come back to bite the Democrats, and they have to deal with that. I also wanted to ask you about this because I thought it was very interesting the way the president answered a question about conservatives having, I think, perhaps over-exaggerated influence on the president. This just in from Ann Coulter. This is a tweet from her just now, about an hour ago. She says, this is not Paul Ryan's fault. It's not Mitch McConnell's fault. Trump ran against the GOP and won. Responsibility is 100% his. Do you think the media over-exaggerates the influence that somebody like Ann Coulter has on the White House?
I don't think Ann Coulter has any influence over this White House or influence over much of anything, to be honest. I don't think she did before the president became the president, and I don't think she does now. I just don't see her as being an influential voice in this country, and certainly not one in this building.
Does the president have a plan to deal with the difficulties that eminent domain could put in front of him as this national emergency goes forward, tries to build the wall? There's a lot of private citizens there, a lot of private property. Does he have a plan for that?
Certainly, he's going to continue working with the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, as well as White House counsel, who will be handling those issues. We feel very comfortable about where we are. And again, we know that the president certainly has the constitutional authority to make this type of declaration, and we feel very good about where we are in the process.
Take a listen to what the president said. Of course, you were there, but I just want to play it for the viewers about drugs and the death penalty.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
Our criminalist, a drug dealer, gets a thing called, how about a fine? And when I asked President Xi, I said, you have a drug problem? No, no, no. I said, you have 1.4 billion people. What do you mean you have no drug problem? No, we don't have a drug problem. I said, why? Death penalty.
Okay, so the president just did a pretty amazing thing with the First Step Act, and that was helping a lot of people in our country be able to resolve their problems with the justice system because of drug penalties that they had to pay. Is the president actually going to put forward anything that would change our laws on this issue?
Legislation or executive action the president would take on that front. I think the point he's making is that we have to be tough. We can't allow people who bring in mass quantities of things like fentanyl who can wipe out an entire community. They picked up at the border just within the last few weeks enough fentanyl that would kill 50 million Americans. I mean, that is an unbelievable just travesty in the fact that those people are allowed to go free in some cases or not be able to be detained for long stretches of time. I think that type of thing is something the president wants to look at, and he certainly wants to be tough on those people.
Can I do one other question, not about the national emergency? I want to ask you about Amazon. New York, that's President Trump's home state. Amazon was going to bring 25,000 jobs to Long Island City. They decided to pull out of that yesterday. Governor Cuomo blamed Mayor de Blasio. Amazon blamed unnamed politicians. New York looks like it's hostile to big business coming in and creating jobs. Does the president have a view on this?
Look, I haven't spoken with him directly about that process. I know the president is somebody who loves companies who are creating jobs, and that's certainly a good thing. He's created an environment that has made that possible, which is why we've seen such a massive influx in the number of people that have gone back to work, and we have now more jobs open for people who actually want to work than we've had in decades. So that's something certainly the president supports, but I'm not going to get in the middle of a squabble of Democrat New York politics right now, but I think it'll be fun to watch those folks battle it out for sure.
I know. I used to try to avoid Texas politics as much as possible. All right, Sarah Sanders, thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.
You bet. Thanks, Dana.
Amazingly, the 2020 election cycle is in full swing at this point. Virtually every notable Democrat really in the world has already jumped in. President Trump looked vulnerable a couple of months ago, maybe even doomed to defeat, and that was, of course, the lure that got them into the race. But things have changed a lot in the last 2 months. The Democratic Party's own wokeness has been the real factor. Watch.
An agency like ICE, which repeatedly and systematically violates human rights, does not deserve a dime.
This administration and this president are truly morally corrupt.
When your son looks at you and says, "Mama, look, you won," bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't, because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach them.
So what would happen if the least balanced, most extreme members of the Democratic Party took over? Well, the president couldn't have scripted better. He may not have built a wall in the end, but his enemies are so terrifying to normal voters that it's helped him. His approval rating is rising. His reflection odds have improved as well. Author and columnist Mark Stein has been watching all this and joins us tonight. So I'm starting to think that maybe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and this Ilhan Omar are working for the Trump organization in some capacity. I mean, it almost seems like a setup. It's just almost too perfect.
Yeah, I think they're colluding with Trump, as we should say.
Good point.
And we need to investigate it. Basically, what is going to happen now is that the trajectory in the Democrat side of the field is that they're all gonna drive each other even more woke. So you'll think that Elizabeth Warren is woke, and she'll make Kamala Harris even more woke, and in the end they'll even succeed in woking Joe Biden, and they're all going to be made super hyper woke. Federal officials, policemen in effect, have discussed using the 25th Amendment because they think President Trump is mentally ill. And as Alan Dershowitz said, that's a judgment that should be made by doctors or secretaries or chiefs of staff, anyone, in fact, but a police agency. And the question before the electorate is going to be, who is really the sane or the insane one?
Yeah.
The party that is proposing retrofitting every single 230-year-old colonial-era farmhouse in northern New England in order to make it compatible with the Green New Deal, the party that is committed to abolishing the Border Enforcement Agency, or the guy who's just there in the White House doing his job, even as he drives deep state lunatics to devise ever more absurd ways of trying to get rid of him.
So you got to wonder if there aren't big parts of the Democratic Party, even the Democratic Party, who are going to look at people like this screaming on CNN all day and think, you know what, this is too much for me. I mean, they could potentially break their party in half.
Yes, I think so, because if you look at what happened last time, they had a problematic and frankly rather unlikable candidate proposing relatively centrist or left of center policies in Democrat terms. This time round, you are going to have candidates who are taking extreme leftist positions. And the risk, of course, is, as with what happened to Ilhan Omar, that in crude identity politics terms, they check all the boxes, they do all the virtue signaling, so they seem kind of nice. And then you read 3 or 4 of their tweets and you realize, actually, this person isn't nice. And I think that's a real danger for the Democrats. Whereas Trump, by comparison, plays a sort of thug and a bully, and he tweets up a storm. But he's actually not unlikable in the same way that some of these Democrats are revealing. Well,
and his policies are basically moderate, which nobody ever says, but it's true.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah. He's relatively centrist on that stuff.
For sure. By the standards of 2 years ago, anyway. Mark Steyn, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.